Mr. Trump is a blessing. And personally, it's surprising to me that I can actually say those words and have them coming out and having no emotional connection with those words. And I'll tell you why. Um, and I'll explain my point of view on why I believe he is an absolute blessing to the cause of humanity, um, and why for me particularly, and humbling as well. I will just start by saying that there is a bias, and if you catch a bias in here and you disagree, of course that's what this is about, is talking about, you know, life and pushing it around, and I'm willing to be open if you see what I'm saying is wrong. I'm open to hearing that. Um, when he first came about, I don't remember. Gosh, funny timing. Was it 2016, 2014, 15? I despised him immediately, and the reason was it wasn't just because I had leaned more left. It was actually um, still came from my roots of being conservative. I used to be a proud Republican. Um, I wouldn't even, and just to put it straight, I don't even consider myself a Democrat now. And I don't like to put a label on me. I don't know where I stand because I have a very different understanding of how the world works than I think um, there's not a label that really covers it. So, but why did I have that visceral reaction? It was because ever since I was a little kid, integrity, honesty, morals, those sat with me. And that's probably why I made a really good conservative, was that it was that universal message of saying there's a right way to be in this world, and we're going to take the moral and the virtuous path. And I felt like the Republican Party and conservatism was more in alignment with that. And, so like, during the Clinton years, during his impeachment things, the thing that really bothered me about that wasn't politically that I hated the guy. I honestly didn't really know much about his politics. I wasn't into politics. But what I did know is that he blatantly lied to us, and I thought that is way out of character and that is out of integrity. And that was the reason I felt he should have been impeached back then. Um, Now I look today, and it's, what ended up happening was that there was, you know, way more things in Trump's past that weren't just rumors, that were like you could literally listen to the man himself say the most despicable things, um, caught on tape. But in the beginning, I wanted to be open minded. And so I have conservative friends, and my conservative friends, I said, how could you possibly support this person? And a common response was, the media is twisting everything to make him seem like this horrible person. So what did I do? I went and, it's like, if that's, I trust people, and I want to look into kind of things. So what I decided would be, I would find I wouldn't find people's opinions about these leaked videos, like the one on the bus, these kind of things. I would find the ones that were just purely that. There was no opinion that went along with it, so I could make my judgment on it. Um, and then there was, uh, and then it was, what was he saying in the speeches? Because that's what the news does, is they try to pick apart. I mean, get rid of just the Trump. They're trying to do it with everybody, and they're trying to get the most um, egregious piece out of something, and then oftentimes sway it so that we have an emotional response to it, because then we'll buy it, right? So what I did is I said, okay, well, I'm just going to read what he's saying. So I read some of the transcripts from some of his talks, and I'm laughing because they're not rationally coherent. They have no logical flow. Um, they have no direction. They just go off and he says things that make no sense. So if you're trying to work it from your logical mind, it ain't going to happen. What I figured out he was doing was he was not trying to lay out a logical message to people. What he was doing was just finding the places where people were provoked into emotion. And so people would get the emotion, and then they could put the story together of where like his words were going all over the place, incoherent statements. But if you have an emotion, you could take the emotion and then you can create your own story around it. And that's what he was brilliant. So how does he work? Like how, and so why do I say he's a blessing? And the reason I say he's a blessing is because he is such a brilliant contrasting figure that shows somebody that took the path of control. So we step into this world spinning on a speck of dust in infinite space. And what I have seen is that we can take two paths when we are here. We can take the path of love and we can take the path of control. And I don't get this from like looking outside of myself. I had to figure out which path I was taking. So I didn't come that I'm not just this. I'm not going to sit and try to make this case that I'm Mr. Love from the beginning. I can tell you that I have always, from the very tiniest age, have always wanted to be a benevolent force in the world. It's always been a core principle of mine. What I had discovered was that because of fear, I had tried many times to go into the control paradigm and manage my life through control rather than love. So when I say love, I don't mean love in some snively, whining, everything's love, dancing around, carefree, hippie kind of esoteric love. I'm talking about powerful, beautiful, inspiring, amazing love. And so my bias in this is that I'm a salesman because I found where I had been using control and healed myself to take the path of love. And I will say that control is not always the easiest path. Control is very difficult. You've got to control other people's will. And love is not easy because it's intimacy. And intimacy is frightening. It's probably one of the things we're most frightened about is intimacy. And we have to be very vulnerable in order to go on the path of love. And so I've been lost, absolutely lost in the control paradigm. And it wasn't through some, I didn't wake up one day and just go, oh, I've awakened to see all of this. No, I took the path of the 2x4, the humility stick being smashed on my back, realizing that the behavior that I thought was benevolent and for the good was actually a destructive thing. And so that's why I say that Trump is great because he is a contrast figure. He has mastered the art of control. And I'll kind of explain this. And I had to, he has taught me even more precisely where I have tried to control and how he can use that aspect within me in order to further his cause, which is to bring more and manifest more into the world. So one of the things that there's this idea of the law of attraction. And it was a friend who had said that, he's a great law of attraction manifester. Well, I kind of had this idea that if I was the good person, then the universe would give me good things back. And we got rewarded with the law of attraction. And what I have learned, and Trump has been just a master at showing me that no, you can pick the control paradigm and you can be just as good at manifesting things. And he's a master. He made it to what we consider as human beings the highest position of power in the whole or in the whole, well, world of us on Earth. That's manifesting. Like, so that what that tells me is the law of attraction in the universe is neutral. Like, it doesn't say that you can be good or you have to be good or bad. You can choose. Like, you can say that control is good or bad. The thing that where I'm on is I'm not going to make a determination. It isn't for me to make a determination of one thing is evil or good or bad. My perspective is I'm a salesman for love because I took the path of love. And what I discovered along the way are things that I know somebody like Trump will never, ever understand. They will never understand what it feels like to understand and use empathy and compassion. He will never understand what pure joy is. And joy is something very different from happiness. Like you can tell that he's addicted to happiness. He's addicted to, always being right and sending text all the time. That's a key of watching him, of just being able to watch his behavior. And you can see that he's addicted. He's a hedonist. He's always constantly fighting to provide himself a good response. Well, you get that from every moment of finding something, a way to make yourself happy. Joy comes from contentment. Joy comes from connection. It's a very different thing. I know that he will not ever understand what intimacy is. He can bring women into his life without having to be vulnerable. There's no evidence to show me that he has any vulnerability with any of his wives, and especially the wife that he has now. There's no vulnerability. There's no deep connection with them. And that's my sales pitch. I'm a sales pitch for love because I believe if you choose love, you get to experience all these other great things. So here's the interesting part of why, like, it made it so real, and so many like things that we have been taught when we got here. Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged yourself." And we're always taught about dropping expectations and not judging and these kind of things. Well, the beauty of that is these are the things that happen with love. But the other side of that is that when we operate within judgment, we actually empower the control paradigm. And what do I mean by this? Here's an example. It used to be that we would go to like a show like South Park, and they created for us a hyperbolic caricature of a persona. So they actually did it of Trump. And so basically we can go there and we can laugh at seeing that behavior playing out in a hyperbolic way, and that's where the comedy comes from. And all of a sudden, here's this man who comes and he is his own caricature. He is the manifest of control, and like getting people to see how does he get people on his side? And that's the interesting part of being a caricature, because to me it was just like, oh, he's a caricature, just like we need to get rid of this egregious caricature from South Park, and all these people are like following him. I'm like, how can you do that? And now I completely understand it. How can you understand? How can you follow a caricature? Well, here's what he does. He has proponents and he has opponents. And so so he's in the control paradigm, and he's perfected the control paradigm. And we have this other population of people. Most of us are a mix of love and control, and we're constantly at odds with this aspect within ourselves. In some religious terms, you'd say that we have good and evil within us, and it's kind of always that fight, which is kind of the truth. It's control and love, and we get scared, and we don't want to be vulnerable, so we'll take the path of control. Well, control is, when we think of control, we always think of the narcissist. We always think of, look at this man, he just controls. He controls to get power. Well, who does he have power over? He has power. If he has power over other people, then those people had to relinquish their power. And that's the definition of codependency. Is, the narcissist aspect within ourselves exerts control in order to gain power, and a codependent then needs to cede their, or give away their control, and so they are allowing themselves to be controlled in order to feel power. And that's the game. That's the complex that we can get stuck in when it comes to control paradigm. And so how does this master really use this control paradigm? And this comes from my own personal experience, because I was a huge Star Wars fan when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be part of the light side. I wanted to be part of the good side. So when I saw characters like Hitler and Saddam Hussein's and all the people that got thrown out as these icons of evil, I wanted to know that my anger and my resentment and my hatred that went towards those people, that gave me this, I'm one of the good people, because I'm coming up from a place is I hate that, so that must make me a good person. So what does Donald Trump do? He's got got to do two things in order to make this system work, so he can get enough support so he can continue doing what he's doing and continue manifesting what he's doing. With his proponents, he preys on their fears and justifies them allowing their anger come up to the surface. Well, he has to point that anger somewhere, so he points it to Democrats or to leftists or that sort of thing. So now what he's doing is he's saying, hey, dude, this is the more, he doesn't do it this way eloquently. You can't do it eloquently. Or at least I don't know of an example where you could do it eloquently. Hey, dude, like your fear and your anger is justified, and it's okay. Take it out on them. Take it out on them. It's always the Democrats' fault. And I don't know, I know a lot of conservatives and people that are Trump people, and I've yet to have one of them have him stand on his own. And what do I mean by that? It means whenever you're in a discussion of why do you like Trump, they always say, well, he's not Hillary, he's not Obama. And the reason the mastery is that Trump creates that. Trump created the enemies so that he can lift himself up and in his followers' eyes, so that he can prove that, look, yeah, I might do some things that are a little bit crazy, but, at least I'm not Obama. I'm not the Hillary. I'm not the, the Democrat. You know what I mean? And so not one person that I have met, and I'm not saying that there aren't people out there, none of them have put him on, had looked at his character on his own, because he's a master. He's a master at taking the blame and pointing it somewhere else. So the interesting thing is he's a caricature. So here's another point of how he's mastered this, is he's a caricature of this. He's hyperbolic. He is egregious in his behavior and his wildness and his spontaneity and like decision making and that sort of thing. So how does he use this? Well, what he does is, on the left, there's all these people that absolutely abhor him and hate him. Well, this is interesting because he uses that. And he points at them and he uses all the bully psychology in order to to get that person so wound up within their anger at him that when they speak their truth, they're often come out. Whenever we speak our truth in anger and anxiety, it comes out very sloppily, and it comes out where you're not saying the right thing. And the minute that like a person comes out to these people, let's say on the left or the Democrats, I mean, he attacks people on the right as well. He just attacks everybody that doesn't agree with his reality. And what he does is that when people come from not a wise place, but from anger, they will say something, and then what he does is he blows any kind of gaffe that they might have done. It could be tiny, but then he takes that gaffe and he explodes it as if, and then makes them into a caricature. So now he is using and manipulating the people that hate him. He's using hate to breed more hate. And he's using people as his little puppets. And so his opponents are actually his puppets. And I understand that. Like, I felt so right when I was kind of in that place. And so it's brilliant. It's truly brilliant. If you just take yourself away from it, it's a brilliant strategy. And if you can pull yourself back, you can see maybe where you stand in this, whether you're a proponent or not a proponent. So, the last point I wanted to make about this video was when I first jumped onto my awakening, let's call it, wanting to figure out what the best path was. I figured out that it had to be a personal thing, and I knew I had to get, or I eventually understood that I had to be walloped by the humility stick to realize that I was once one of those people that could have been used by a Trump because I felt like hatred and anger was justified. And then I realized now I very saliently can see that it's actually used. It's not just that it's a good or bad thing, it's the fact that it's used. So when Jesus says, judge not lest ye be judged, I think that that was also a warning that says, if you judge people, you will become not necessarily punitively judged back, but they will figure out a way to use it, and it'll come back and bite you on the butt. And how it bites me on the butt is not necessarily, it takes me off my rhythm in my game. And my game is love. My game is being benevolence and spreading joy and things into the world. So if I'm playing in that arena, I'm not gonna get what I want to see happen in the world. And I have just as much right to the game as a Mr. Trump has. The game of life. And so what I learned was when I first started this, I had been taught by a mentor that being serious was not necessary. And it was kind of a concept that I wanted to look at. And then I started to understand, after getting walloped by the humility stick quite a few times in my life, I started to realize that what serious means is that we come from making decisions from anger and anxiety. And it's like culturally, we believe that, and we propagate this idea if I've got my brows furrowed like this and I'm really, really angry at Mr. Trump and all the bad people out there and whatever else, that I'm on the side of good, or I'm on the right side. But if you understand that anxiety and anger takes us away from wisdom and it makes us dumb, we then are not providing for the light. We're not providing for love. We're providing an opportunity for people who are who are choosing the control path, whether unconsciously or consciously choosing it. We're giving them manipulative tool in order to lift themselves up in whatever and manifest what they want rather than what we want. And so now I see my not taking things seriously, I make them important. So let me make that decision. Like there's things that I do, I instill consciously that are important and one thing over another. Um, but I don't take it seriously because I know with seriousness comes anger and anxiety, and I'm motivated from those forces. And I want to be motivated from a centered position. I want to be motivated from a higher truth. And it also, when we see like an icon of Trump up there, we can also see the he's also exposing, if you're able to pull yourself away from the emotional stimulation that happens in this game, you can actually see that a lot of the people that he's using for his gain, his opponents, he is actually exploiting their shadow side and their contribution to the control complex. One example are people who are victim advocates. See, just the minute that I say victim advocate, it might bring up the connotation that, oh, well, any victim advocate has to be a good person. No. um, we do want justice in our world. It's necessary. And just because we love doesn't mean that justice needs to be, swept away. That's kind of how we're characterized. People that would take the love path would be characterized as they just want everything to be loose and free and let all the criminals go and blah blah blah. And that's not it. So what does the control complex do? It actually twists these beautiful things, and it's not like Trump has to, a lie is a parasite of truth. A lie actually has to have some aspect of truth to it in order for it to carry on. And so he uses the patriotic thing. He uses these things, and you just go, oh, well, if he's patriotic, then he has to be a good person. Like that's kind of I mean, you can get rid of Trump and just say that's kind of the politician thing. But you've got to realize that it can be used for the shadow side. It can be used for the control complex. And so let's go back to victim advocates. Well, there's victim advocates that their perspective is, and they share this perspective that that once you've been victimized, you have to live with that trauma for the rest of your life. And I can say that that is 100% non-accurate. We all, like living as a human being is a traumatic event. We woke up conscious on a speck of dust floating in infinite space. That in itself is a trauma. And there's all kinds of aspects of trauma that we go through in our lives. And, and we try to play but this trauma is worse than this trauma. No, any kind of trauma you do not have to live as a victim of that trauma for the rest of your life. In fact, a beautiful advocate doesn't say, you don't go around and say, don't be a victim. That's kind of the other side of it is, then people come out and say, that there should be no softness for victims, just get over it. That's kind of one of the sayings. And that's not the wise perspective. An actual advocate of trauma would be somebody that says, okay, we need to find justice. We need to find a place for you to be vulnerable, to have a place of grace, to work through your trauma, and then also to give them an idea, the light that's beyond the trauma. Because to me, the trauma that I've gotten over in my life has has been the reason that I can see the love path. It's given me an insight into the beauty of empathy. It's given me an insight into the beauty of humility. It's given me insight into the beauty of vulnerability. And if I go back and say, if I never had that trauma, well, maybe I would have never experienced love, like deep love, transcendent love. But people who are advocates of victims oftentimes are victims themselves who never work through the trauma. And so basically what they're saying is, we need all of the rest of you to like basically lay down soft pillows all over the world so we can manage life. And that's kind of egregious, and I'm using kind of hyperbolic, or I wouldn't say hyperbolic because it's actually true, but the most contrasty examples, and that's what I'm saying. What is Trump? He's this caricature and contrast of, he's the opposite of love. He does not, you could see how he uses love as, his ruse. But on the other side are these codependents who are really truly, it's, if you're playing in the control complex, you're not just codependent, you're actually narcissist. Because isn't it narcissist if you yourself cannot get over your trauma and you can't work through your trauma, so you then keep spreading this idea to other people that they will never get through trauma themselves? Isn't that kind of narcissistic? Isn't that thinking about yourself before you think of somebody else? And again, that may come out as a judgment, but it's not. It's just math. It's just math, and it's just a choice in how we play the game as being a human.